Welcome back to another episode of Cooking from the Cupboard. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about the distribution on North Campus and the food products that are distributed there. These are items that are free for folks that want to go up to North Campus and just get some food. Basically, everything is entailed in a box, and the products are all different from each other. And I've got some of these items here today to show you. Basically, they're mostly comprised items. We have bagged spaghetti sauce. We've got some cut canned sweet potatoes. Some chicken. This is basically like tuna fish, canned tuna, but it's chicken instead. A little bit of just a basic peach fruit cocktail and simple syrup. And a couple of soups. So these are all comprised items. We don't really mix these with anything else, but this is really wholesome food. So if you really don't have anything, this is a great way to get some nutrition quickly. If you're on the go, wherever, if it's lunch or dinner, this is really simple. Just follow the instructions on the back of these cans, and whether it's microwave or in a pot, this is a great way to get nutrition. In collaboration with the distribution on North Campus, we have the Maize and Blue Cupboard. And at the Maize and Blue Cupboard, people are able to get food for free. It's a brick and mortar location, so you can walk in and instantly immerse yourself into a shopping excursion, and they have an array of products there for people to be able to make wholesome meals. What's really important about that is that when you're in the cupboard and you're shopping for ingredients, sometimes the ingredients will not always be the same. They get distributions themselves and accept products from different locations at the university. Wonderful products, really, but they will be different when you do go shopping there. And today, Cooking from the Cupboard, we're really kind of taking some of the ingredients from the North Campus food distribution and products that I went and shopped at the Maize and Blue Cupboard and kind of putting them together into a good, wholesome meal. We'll talk a little bit about some cooking techniques, and we'll talk a little bit about how flavor profiles go together. And I hope that you'll be excited about the meal that we're making today. And it's basically a vegetarian take on a Southern style cuisine. We're gonna make sweet corn cheddar grits. We're gonna take some canned collard greens, which is basically an ingredient that you would find on the North Campus distribution. We're gonna add some flavor to that with some of the ingredients that we got at the cupboard together. And we're also gonna make some sweet potato dumplings. These dumplings are similar to gnocchi, but it's a basic dumpling. This is really about taking basic ingredients, if you don't have a lot at home, and trying to make something with different flavor profiles and different textures at the same time, making a comprised meal and getting some good nutrition. So we're gonna use really basic ingredients. I'd also like to talk a little bit about some staple ingredients that you might have at your own home, like salt and pepper, a little bit of cooking oil, and today we are going to use a little bit of some blackening seasoning. Now you won't find seasonings at the cupboard. You most likely won't find seasonings or oils in the distribution. But if you do have these ingredients home, they'll allow you to make these meals with some flavor, some seasoning, and they don't really cost a whole lot of money. They go a long way, so you can use them over and over again. But real basic stuff. So now we're gonna make the grits. Basically, we have a box of white corn grits, very simple. Ingredient instructions on the back. I'm not necessarily gonna follow them exactly today, just because I'm incorporating other ingredients into this to give it a little bit more flavor. So there's a little bit of flexibility there going on. But if you're just having the grits, and this recipe here just incorporates water, it's very simple. You can either microwave this or you can cook it on a stovetop. Just follow the instructions and voila, you have wholesome white corn grits. We're gonna make sweet corn cheddar grits, and we're gonna use these. We have the corn here, and this is canned corn. This is right from the North Campus food distribution. So we've got corn. We know it goes great with cheddar cheese and grits. Perfect combination, a little salt and pepper. Here's the cheddar. Now this cheddar, I actually found this over at the Maize and Blue Cupboard. So they had blocks of cheese. If you're ever shopping in the cupboard and you enjoy cheese and you can find that there, please grab some. What a great way to get a source of protein that's not common in food pantries. Here's the grits. And then here's a PC of butter. With a PC of butter, you can find this almost anywhere. And very simple if you have butter. If you don't have butter, that's okay. Dairy products do go well with grits. But I found these little PCs here, and that's what we're going to use today. Don't need a whole lot, but butter does add a fat content, which is actually good for people. Fat is a part of our nutrition that we really do need. It's all about moderation with it. And then it adds that, butter really brings out the flavor. We have water, just simple water. And the ingredients on this box is water. So we're going to use that. Could you use a broth? Could you use a stock or some bouillon? If you wanted to add chicken flavor to that, you could add a little bit of bouillon in with your water and into the dish. Bouillon and stocks and broths all come in different packaging, and you can buy them at the supermarket. You may even find some condensed products in the food pantry. And then I found a little bit of milk. This is just a PC milk, very simple, retail style. It's enough to make with the amount of grits that we're actually going to make today. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to heat our pan. I got the pan basically at a kind of medium-low heat. Just kind of start there, not too hot. And I'm going to add some water. That's about 3/4 of a cup. Might turn the heat up a little bit. I'm going to add some grits. It's about 3/4 of a cup. And then I'm going to whisk. Now you can't see this right now, but really it's quite liquidy. And I'm looking at the amount here, and I'm thinking, this is really enough for about a party of 3 or 4. But I'm going to add a little bit more, just because I want to be able to do a really good show and tell. I'm actually going to add a little bit more water. First, a little more grits. And you may need to add more liquid, but we are going to add milk. I'm bringing up the temperature so it'll boil. I'm going to add a pinch of salt. Now I'm going to add pepper to this too, just to give it a little more spice. Bring out the flavor just a little bit more. I'm not going to add too much. Just want to keep in mind that when you do add pepper to something white like grits, you're going to have those little specks in there. So if you don't want that in the presentation of your food, then you would just omit. The other option is you could add white pepper. If you have white pepper at home, you can use that. White pepper is quite a bit more spicy than black pepper. So I don't know if there's really a ratio for how much less white pepper you would use, but I would say that it's probably 3/4 less. So if you were using say a teaspoon of black pepper, that's when you would go to a 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper, maybe even 1/8 of a teaspoon. You'd be surprised. You have to cook with white pepper a lot to kind of get the idea of the spice content of it. Adding too much white pepper will actually really overpower the flavor of the food. So now we've got this, you can see the steam coming up here. This is at a nice boil. And the grits are really thickening good. I can turn the temperature down. And just to mention, this right here is an induction burner. This is an electrical piece of equipment that people don't commonly have. So when you're cooking on your stovetop, whether you have an electric stovetop or gas, you're really just gonna turn it down to a low heat or a low flame. This is thickening up nicely. I can add a little more water just to kind of give it a little more sauciness. Now I can add my milk. If you have heavy cream, you can use that. Right, there's about 1/3 cup. I'm really not working with an exact amount of ingredients. What I'm doing is I know that the grits are going to bloom and they're gonna thicken whatever liquids I have in there. I'm just kind of looking at it. The thought to keep in mind is whenever you add more of a neutral flavor profile liquid into something, is that you sometimes have to readjust the seasoning. You might add a little more salt. You might add a little more cheese or butter. It's really, I'm looking at this. I can see that this looks really nice right now. I want it to cook. These are like 5-minute instant grits, so they don't really take a long time to cook. And they're really flexible. And you can have this thick as you want, or as thin as you want. It's almost like you're cooking oatmeal, or you're doing a polenta, which is an Italian style grit. And polenta is made with a kind of a semolina cornmeal. It's really nice. It's yellow in color. Okay, now that I've got this at the right consistency that I like, I'm gonna add a little corn. I'm not gonna say, I would say this is probably a 1/4 cup that I'm adding in. I don't wanna add too much. I kind of like the idea of the vegetable component being a garnish for the grits. I can see the little yellow specks in here that contrast with the white. Now I can add some cheese, my favorite part. I'm just gonna put in some, probably another 1/4 cup. I'm gonna whisk. Here's the thing about cheese, especially this style of cheese, with its moisture content. When you add this, you wanna whisk all the time, kind of keep the temperature down. Otherwise, the cheese could actually seize up and add a different texture to the grits that you don't really want. It's almost, I'll tell you, most of the times when I'm cooking at home, I'll even shut off the heat. I actually think I'm gonna do that right now. I'll shut off the heat, and the residual heat that's in the grits is going to melt that cheese perfectly. I've got the consistency that I like. The cheese actually is gonna thicken this a little bit. My butter. maybe a couple of those. That looks great. Once I add my butter, I want to whisk it in. I want that butter to kind of emulsify into the grits. And you know, taste your food when you're cooking it. You know, we're kind of adding flavors in different stages. You know, you can taste the food and you can adjust the seasoning. Now, this kind of grit, this is going to sit for a little bit, and it's going to thicken. But this is a nice, soft, kind of runny grit, cheesy, voluptuous, which is going to be really nice with our collard greens and our dumplings, which we're going to put on top. See, you can see that? That's a nice runny grit. Nice and soft. It's more like, this is more like a sauce for the dish. It's really not like a mashed potato that's going to sit up high on the plate. It's more like a sauce. It's almost like cream cheddar corn, but the base of it is a white corn grit. Now we're going to make the collard greens. So we've taken the canned collard greens, and what I've done with these is I've cut the top of the can, and I kind of went to the sink and squished down on the can and drained out the liquid. Try to do that as much as possible. You really don't want any of that liquid in there. It's kind of more of a canned flavor. But once you do that, you can see, you know, they're a little dry. There's definitely some moisture content in here. That's perfectly fine. You know, I would say that there is probably vitamins, minerals inside of the water that you're actually squeezing out, but we're gonna add back in with some fresh, wholesome vegetables. I've got some onion. You can find onion in the cupboard. Bell pepper, you may not necessarily find bell pepper in the cupboard. It depends on the season, right? So, but if you do have bell pepper at home, this works really good. You could use a canned roasted pepper. Sometimes they come sliced or whole, and you got to cut them up a little bit. And then I've got some garlic. Just a note, when doing a little knife work, a lot of chefs will take a whole clove of garlic, and they'll just kind of put their knife on there and they smash down. It smashes the garlic, and then you just kind of run your knife through it, just like that. Real simple. If you don't feel comfortable doing something like that, they make little devices that you can crush the garlic, or you could just take with your knife and just keep cutting it and cutting it. Smashing it like this kind of makes the process a little bit quicker. For the bell pepper, I really just imagine the whole bell pepper here. I just cut off a side, and then I just take my knife and run my knife through it. I'm keeping the tip of my knife on the cutting board, and I'm cutting strips just like that. And you just turn them around, face them off like that, and do the same the other way. And you get a nice dice. If you want to do something a little bit more fancy, then you can take this and angle this with your knife, just like this. So you can see the little tips right there. And then you're going to cut diagonally, just like that. Real careful. And what you get, this is called a losange cut, and you get basically little diamond shapes. Kind of fun, not necessary, but just to give you a little perspective on knife cuts. So there's our diced bell peppers. Our pan is hot, kind of a medium-low heat. Add a little bit of cooking oil. And the first thing we're going to saute is the onion. Put a little bit of onion there. It's probably about a 1/4 cup. It's not sizzling right away, so we can turn up our heat. just give it a little stir, kind of pat out the onions a little bit. We can add in our bell pepper. This is going to give a little color to the collard greens. The canned collard greens have been braised down, so they're really, really cooked well. We can add our garlic. Starting to sizzle. In one of our last episodes, we talked about aromatics. This is almost like a trinity of flavors they use in the South. One ingredient that we're missing here is celery for a kind of Southern style cuisine, but that's okay. The bell pepper is going to add a nice sweet aromatic to this dish that really makes it feel authentic. Everybody loves garlic. That's sauteing nicely. We can add a little pinch of salt. We can do a little pepper. Give it a mix. Now, at this point, we're really cooking on high heat. Want to be careful. If you have to turn it down, you can. And if it browns a little bit, that's all right. Sometimes the caramelization process really brings out different flavors that a lot of people do enjoy. Now we can add our collard greens. Can really just add them right in like this. Just kind of shake the pan a little bit. Now, if this becomes really dry for you, you could add a little water. You could add a little pat of butter. Kind of deglaze the pan a little bit. Really nice. Not necessary. But when we did add in the collard greens, we would taste the food. And if it needed a little bit more salt, we just add a little more salt. You like it a little bit more spicy, then you can add in black pepper. Really simple. This looks really nice. I like the amount of liquid in the pan. There's really none. It's kind of cooking off some of the canned juice water, and I like that. You're looking for some translucence in the onion. You're softening the bell pepper, but you're not overcooking it so that the color of the bell peppers are lost or that they become too sauced. It's that you're keeping the nutrition in the pan by keeping the bell pepper a little bit more crunchy. I kind of like that. If you don't, you can cook this a little bit more. Really simple. A great way to add some color to your dish and some flavor to the collard greens that it really don't have any because they're just collard greens and water in a can. Just to show you a little bit better, that's kind of what that looks like. You can see the nice speckles of the red peppers and the onions are in there. The garlic's going to give it some flavor. And voila. Now we're going to make the sweet potato dumpling. This is a really, really basic dumpling recipe. It's almost like making a pasta dough at home, but we're not going to take it so far as the elasticity and the gluten working of the dough to make it a pasta dough. There's also the possibility that you could make a sweet potato pancake with a similar recipe like this. What we're not incorporating into this is any eggs. Now, if you do add eggs to this recipe, that would be wonderful. We won't necessarily have eggs at home. This dumpling dough is basically just flour and sweet potato. The sweet potato, as you can see, as I've got here, this is a mashed sweet potato. Now, I found whole sweet potatoes at the cupboard, and basically what I did was I seasoned them with a little bit of olive oil and some salt and pepper. I put them in a pan wrapped it with tin foil, and baked it in the oven at about 350 degrees for about an hour. At that point, you remove the sweet potatoes from the oven. You can remove the tin foil, touch the sweet potato, or kind of push down on it with a spoon, and you'll see that it's quite soft. Allow the sweet potatoes to cool. Now, you don't have to allow them to cool all the way, but room temperature is really nice. At that point, they're really good to work with. The sweet potato you would take whole, it's cooked, it's baked, it's soft and tender. With your knife, you cut both ends, cut it in half, flip them up, and then kind of just cut off the skin. The skin really it can come right off with your fingers, but if you have a knife and you want to do it that way, it works perfectly fine. At that point, you take the sweet potato, you would put it into a mixing bowl just like this, and if you want to wear gloves, you can. You don't have to wear gloves. I have gloves, so I'm going to wear gloves today, but you don't have to wear gloves. Just wash your hands really good. A lot of people make pasta dough and they use their hands, bare hands, and we cook at home with our bare hands all the time. Just real nice, clean hands really works well. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking this mashed up sweet potato and I'm adding it into my mixing bowl. And I'm going to add a little salt. Probably about a half a teaspoon. I like a little pepper. And then a unique ingredient, but pretty common, especially in Southern style cuisine, is a little kind of Cajun seasoning. It's a combination of different spices. It typically has cayenne pepper, which adds some heat to it. We can add some of that in here. That's going to give it that Southern style flavor that people really enjoy. You can add as much as you want. So I've got probably 3/4 of a teaspoon in there. If you want it spicy, you're going to go right in. There's also some salt content there, so it's really, really nice. Here, we got some flour. This is basic all-purpose flour. You'll find this anywhere. It's very affordable if you can't find it in the cupboard. And the quantity of flour in the sweet potato can vary based on the water content of the sweet potato. When I made this dough, which I already have already, it was pretty much equal portions. It's going to vary. It's really more about when you're working the dough, what you're looking for, and I'm going to show you. So I'm sprinkling a good amount on. I'm not going all in. I'm not going all the flour in and working it. I'm going to work it in stages. So really, I just kind of getting in here, and I'm incorporating the flour. I'm really just kind of rolling the mashed up sweet potato around in the flour and just getting it started. I know that this is super sticky, and it's going to stick to your hands, that's for sure. Once you get some good flour in there, and you're starting to really blend the two together, that's when you're going to start adding a little bit more flour. I can pat this down and I can see how sticky it is. It's going to take a little bit. Kind of just want to work this. Got a little bit on the table. We're going to add some more. Probably, I don't know, 1/3 of a cup. I'm squishing it down. It's messy, that's for sure. It's really nice to start this in a mixing bowl. It kind of frees you up from making a mess all over the counter, but that's okay. If you wanted to even just do this straight on the cutting board, you can. But with the sweet potato, since it is so wet, I like to start it in a mixing bowl. You might find some little black specks in your sweet potatoes. That's from some of the skin, the residual skin that's left. You can pluck those out if you want. They're perfectly edible too, so it really doesn't make a difference. If you're trying to get a certain look to your sweet potato dumpling, you kind of just remove the little specks of skin in there that you might find. And you know, with the mashed with sweet potato, if you just mash it with your hands, that's all I did. It may be a little, there may be a little clumpy texture in there. That's okay. If you have a food processor at home and you want to put the cooked sweet potato into the food processor and pulse it in there, that will give it a nice, thin, smooth texture. But even if there is a little bit of some clumps in there, it's really not going to take away from the dish very much. You can see I'm really going in, and I'm working this. Now, I would continue to work this. You're incorporating your flour. It's not too stiff, but right now it's come together. You can see that it's got this ooey gooiness to it still. It's not quite the dough that you're looking for a dumpling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a little bit of flour, put it down on my cutting board, kind of just fan it out a little bit. Maybe roll that in there. And I'm going to knead it. Just to show you, I'm kind of folding it over. I'm pushing down, and I'm kneading this just like a dough. It's almost like you're making bread. You're going to need a little more flour. That's okay. Start adding a little bit less flour maybe. And you're going to work this and continue to work this to get that nice dumpling dough. When you do have the dumpling dough ready, you're going to take it and you're going to put it in the fridge. Allow it to rest for about 20 minutes. Here's our dough that's rested. This has been in the fridge for about 20 minutes. And we're going to take it out. We've got some of our flour still here on our cutting board. And we're going to take the dough and just kind of get it out of the container. It's quite sticky still. But you can see when you pat this that it's got some gluten worked into it. It's really come together quite nicely. You can take it, you can knead it a little bit more just to kind of work it. It might be really cold, so you can allow it to rest a little bit. It's kind of nice to have it a little cold also, because what we're going to do is we're just going to cut this. I'm patting it down, maybe shaping it up a little bit. It's not sticking too bad. If it does start to stick, you can just raise it up, add a little flour to your cutting board, and then put it back down. You don't really need to work it too much. I'm just kind of shaping it. And then we're going to take our knife and we're going to cut it. You can cut this in half. Take that. It really doesn't matter. You can make them big or small. The bigger they are, the longer they take to cook. I kind of like a nice little fat gnocchi size. You can cut just like this. Really simple little cubes, right? Take these, go right into your boiling water. Now these are gonna cook, and they're gonna, because this is a fresh dough, they may even come right up to the surface right away, depending on how dense they are. If they're sitting at the bottom of the water, that's perfectly fine, because really what that tells you is the consistency of them. They need to kind of get some heat into the center and cook that gluten and the sweet potato and get it nice, so the texture is really good. Allow them to cook until they come to the top. But if they do come up to the top right away, turn down your heat and allow them to simmer. It does take about 10 to 20 minutes for these to cook. It just depends on how big you cut them. If you're in a hurry, you cut them smaller. If you want some nice big dumplings for your presentation and you're only gonna put 3 on a plate, then you're gonna have your boiling water, add your dumplings, allow them to cook for about 20 minutes, maybe turn down the heat so it's not on a rapid boil. But this is a nice size, and they will bloom a little bit. And here's the thing, if you add egg, which is a leavening agent, that's gonna allow them to bloom a little bit more. You could also utilize some baking powder. Baking powder is a nice leavening agent. It's a dry powder that you can find in grocery stores, usually typically in a little can, and you add probably about 2 teaspoons to the amount of product that we made today, and that will give it a nice kind of a nice leavening to it. So the texture will be a little softer. These will be quite dense because they're only flour in there with some seasonings and the sweet potato. But when you look at these, you can see they have a nice kind of peachy color to them. They have a nice shape. These can be added to a cream sauce or any kind of sauce that goes with sweet potato. And they're just really great. We have the grits, which are really saucy and have a nice velvety texture. And then our collard greens. You can season these up with a little bit of salt if you want when they come out of the water, but they will take a little bit to cook. Okay, so now we're gonna plate up. The first thing we're gonna start with is the sweet corn and cheddar grits. We've got our pot here, here's our grits. We're just gonna take a nice little dollop of this and go onto our plate, right? Maybe if you want a little bit more, you can. Maybe if you want to kind of just swirl it around a little bit, you can do that. That's a nice little presentation. And then we've got our collard greens with the bell peppers and the onions and the garlic, right? We'll just kind of put a little dollop of that down there. Maybe you make certain you add a little bit more red pepper on it just to give it that contrast of color. Try to keep the food off the rim of the plate. I kind of like the presentation nice and clean. And then we have our sweet potato dumplings. Now, you can take these out of the pan and go into another pan and then adjust the seasoning. Maybe add a little salt on them. If you wanted to add a little bit of extra virgin olive oil or maybe a touch of Cajun seasoning on it, you can certainly do that. You could have a nice hot frying pan, and then you add in a pat of butter, add your cooked gnocchi just like this, your little dumplings, and you saute them and get them a little brown and caramelize them a little bit before going into the dish. You could certainly do that. We're not doing that today, but I just want to show you and tell you that these are all different cooking techniques that can be used when making a dish like this. Right here, we're just going to go right on top. They are hot, so maybe we'll just do one more. That's pretty much perfect for this dish. And voila. If by chance you have some kind of fresh herbs, today I've got a little scallion in your pantry, you can use this as a nice little garnish. And that's just a bias cut on the scallions just to give it a little green and poke out the presentation a little bit. Thanks for joining us, Cooking at the Cupboard, and I look forward to our next episode.